I want to thank Ms. Brown and the other staff for having me here to speak to you today. And are there any questions?
I was just curious on average from like the first call to finally being buried or cremated, what's the average cost of funeral?
It depends on what you want. Do it for about $10,000, and that's gonna include some cemetery property, and that again, that's gonna vary depending upon the area of the country. You know what prices, you know, the cemetery is charging, what type of casket you get. It's a lot less for cremation, but the $10,000 can also be on the table if you're doing, say for example, cremation where you want the cremains to be buried in ground, or if you want them to be placed above ground in a niche. You know, whether or not you want to take your loved one's body into a church. Anytime we have to move the body, that's going to cost a little more, because then we have automobile costs. Now, for example, at the facility where I work currently, we have a chapel on site. So whenever people choose to use our facility, it's a lot more economical. But it can really range. You know, sometimes you can do it for 5 or 6. You know, if you're wanting to say have your loved one cremated and you're going to take the cremains home with you. Just for that, that's called a basic cremation. And as of the end of last year, we charged $1,295 for that, $1,295. So it really depends on what it is, the method of what we call disposition you're choosing.
Hey, say like, you're like across the country and your loved one dies here, and they weren't able to like get any help, and the neighbors noticed something in the house. How would you like do the paperwork if you don't have any information on that person?
Again, that will probably end up being a medical examiner situation in the scenario that you just gave. Say, for example, the neighbor finally went over, okay, and was not getting any type of response. Maybe they have a key, maybe they were that close, okay, and they go inside and they find, the loved one's body there. What they'll have to do at that point is call 911. Even if they went around the house and say they saw a card in the home that said Ponte Vedra Valley, so they assume that they've made arrangements with us, or that they chose to use our services once the person was deceased, and the neighbor puts 2 and 2 together and gives us a call. Well, as soon as they tell us that they walked in the house and found this person deceased, what I'm responsible to do at that point is to tell them to go ahead and call 911. Because I'm not allowed to come and pick up that body until I have, direct instruction to do so from a law enforcement individual at that point. And usually, say for example, that person, had been under some type of medical care, okay? The detective comes in, looks around, sees pill bottles with the doctor's name on it, dated, say as far back as 6 months, and they can confirm, they'll probably call that doctor and make sure that they've been under doctor's care as far back as 6 months. And what will happen is the detective will go ahead and release us to go ahead and come and pick up the body, is what would happen at that point. If not, and the detective is unable to go ahead and confirm that they were technically under the attended care of a physician during that time window, then they're going to have to call the medical examiner's office to go ahead and come and get them. And they may or may not perform an autopsy, but they're going to check into the situation further. They may choose to go ahead and perform an autopsy to determine the cause of death and make sure there was no foul play. And that's the issue. That's the real reason why we can't just come in at that point and take the body, and bring it into our care without having that permission. question?
Okay, if, like he was saying, you found him in the house dead or whatever, how do you list that on the death certificate? Because you can't give a specific time.
They will determine the time. That is part of what the medical examiner does. When they perform the autopsy, they will make their best estimation of the cause of death, as well as the time of death, as well as the place of death. And at that point, it's completely out of our hands. What will be on the death certificate is what they decide. If the family takes issue with that, what we have to do is tell them to contact the medical examiner's office. They also have the right to have an independent autopsy performed. They have to pay for it, and it's not cheap. But I've had families who've chosen to do that because they just did not agree with what they were being told was the cause of death. I've had families choose to do that even when their loved one didn't end up with a medical examiner. They just disagree with the physician who's had the care of their loved one all this time. Sometimes the grief is so overwhelming that anything can cause them to be further upset.
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't know if I missed this already, but what motivated you to want to go into this profession, and what's the excitement in it for you?
Oh, wow. Good question. I get that question a lot.
Okay.
I always tell people, I didn't choose this, it chose me.
Okay.
And when I say that, what I mean is it is literally like a ministry for me. You don't go into this profession expecting to make a lot of money. People think that funeral directors are rich and you're just gonna make all this money. I mean, you have no idea how many people have said that to me. And I'm just like, whew, no, not the case. Is the potential there for that to happen? Yes. But you end up paying a lot of dues, before that time rolls around, and you probably have to own your own first before you're going to make that type of income. So to more specifically answer your question, how I got on this path was, I came back from Texas with my bachelor's degree to Jacksonville, and was looking for a job like all other students. And I was not immediately finding this market to be great, to be honest with you. So I was considering going back to school to get, a further degree. And in between that time, what happened was that my grandmother, she became ill. She was diagnosed with dementia. And she lived in Gainesville. My mother's sisters were basically on shifts, all the family. They have a huge family in Gainesville. And everyone was on shifts helping to take care of her at this point. So we had our shift. We were going back and forth to assist on weekends and everything. And during the course of that time, a very challenging time, I came up close and personal with death. I was literally there, held her hand, hours before she did pass away in the middle of the night. And it was a very humbling experience, very challenging. There's nothing like being that close to death, and you all will experience it. It puts a lot of things in perspective in life. You see what's really important and what's really not. So I ended up basically helping with a lot of the funeral arrangements once she passed. My aunt, one of my aunts, the oldest, she had reached out to me and asked me to come to the arrangement conference with she and her sisters and my mother. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just be the secretary and I'll take notes. I was feeling like that was my role. She asked me to do the program ultimately, which was kind of like a personal ministry I did for a number of people at church when they lost loved ones. Wasn't anything I charged for, and I actually got to know one of the interns there and became good friends with one of the interns at the funeral home that they chose. And through talking, I was explaining my situation, I was looking for a job, things like that. And name. It's like, I was watching you, and I really think that you should consider this. You seem to have the aptitude for it. I'm seeing you with your family, and how you're attending to them and everything. And so I just, I kind of made a little note of that. And, during the course of my trying to make up my mind what my next move was and praying about that, I was considering that at that point, as well as going back for a master's in counseling, which happens to be another aptitude that you have to do this job. And ultimately that actually is my next move too, because it really, goes hand in hand. And so that's how I ended up doing that. I went out to Florida State College at Jacksonville, got more information, applied to the program, got accepted, and went through that process, 1.5 to 2.5 year process, very grueling. We take a lot of the same classes that you all take, to become nurses. We have to have a great understanding of the human body as well, disease. I had a number of classmates in the program who were nurses previously, or who had started out in the nursing program and decided to transition into this. So if at some point in your future, you see that, down the line, you've already taken a lot of the classes, you would need. So that's basically how I got into it, and I don't regret one moment of it, not even when I was literally copying all the vocabulary words in every textbook. Our director did not play. I mean, he did not play at all. Like I said, when I say grueling, it was grueling. Did I say every textbook? Every textbook. We had to copy the glossary. Okay? Black ink only, skip a line between each word, no cross-outs, no whiteouts. If you made a mistake, rip it up and start over. I mean, but it paid off, because the National Board Examination for Funeral Services is unlike anything you will ever experience in your life. A friend of mine, classmate who had taken the NCLEX, who was also a nurse previously, even admitted she was just like, this was worse than the NCLEX.
What?
So, it's people don't really realize it's a lot of work. You work hard. You work long hours. You're up on your feet. You attend to families. But again, I love every single day of going to work. I really, I love where I work. I love the families that, I attend to. It's just like they become a part of your family, because you're with them during the worst time of their lives. It's not unlike what you're going to experience as CNAs or as medical assistants. You take these people into your heart, so I'm kind of sappy, so I think that's kind of awesome. I still don't quite make up for the salary, but one day it will. One day it will. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions?